Welcome to Cluster Fudge, the podcast that unravels the mess one thread at a time. I'm your host, Alexandra, and today we're shedding light on something that affects half the world's population, but rarely makes the news. It's not glamorous, it's not trending on social media, and yet it touches health, education, safety, and dignity. Today's episode is called Silent Struggles, Female Sanitation in Poor Countries. We're diving into the hidden crisis of menstruation and hygiene, the lack of access to clean water, toilets, sanitary pads, and education that holds millions of girls and women back. This is about poverty. It's about culture. It's about shame. But more than anything, it's about justice. Let's begin. Let's start at the beginning, not with plumbing policies or even poverty. Let's start with silence. Because before there is injustice, there is invisibility. And before there is invisibility, there is taboo. Menstruation, the biological reality for over 1.8 billion people globally, is still treated like a secret. A shameful, dirty, embarrassing thing that must be hidden, whispered about, or outright ignored. Across cultures, across continents, menstruation is not spoken of openly. Not in homes, not in schools, not in places of worship, not in politics. The result? Generations of women and girls growing up without the vocabulary, without the support, and without the dignity to manage their periods safely and healthily. Let that sink in. A girl can reach puberty and still not know what menstruation is because no one ever told her. No mother, no teacher, no community leader. And when that first period arrives, it's terrifying. It's confusing. It feels like something is wrong with her body. Now multiply that by millions of girls around the world. In many communities, especially in South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Latin America, periods are seen as impure. Girls on their period can be forbidden from entering kitchens, kept out of school, prohibited from touching water or crops, banned from religious rituals, even forced to sleep in huts or sheds outside the family home, all because of a natural biological process. And yet, because no one talks about it, the myths continue. The misinformation festers. Superstition takes the place of science. Shame takes the place of support. Let's talk about what that kind of silence does to a girl. Imagine being told, implicitly or explicitly, that your body is dirty every single month. Imagine bleeding in a school uniform and having nothing to manage it with. No pads, no privacy, no way to clean yourself. Imagine walking home in blood-stained clothes while boys tease you or elders scold you. Over time, this doesn't just humiliate, it erodes self-esteem. It tells girls, your body is a problem, your pain is not important, your needs are not worthy of discussion. And so they stop asking, they stop talking, they retreat inward. This isn't just a women's health issue, this is a mental health issue, a gender equality issue, a human rights issue. Now take that same silence and bring it into a classroom. In many poor countries, menstrual health education is non-existent. Girls don't learn what's happening in their own bodies. Boys don't learn how to be allies. Teachers are often embarrassed or restricted by cultural norms. And the impact? When girls reach puberty, school attendance drops sharply. According to UNESCO, 1 in 10 girls in sub-Saharan Africa miss school during their periods. In some countries, girls miss up to 20% of the school year simply because they don't have the means or the freedom to manage menstruation. In rural Nepal, some girls are forced to skip school for an entire week every month, locked away in sheds due to a tradition called chaupadi, which views menstruating women as spiritually polluted. How can a girl compete academically with boys if she's missing school a quarter of the time? How can she build a future if her education is disrupted by something she can't control and can't even talk about? What happens when taboos become policy? In many places, this culture of silence extends beyond homes and schools and becomes baked into policy. Governments don't prioritize menstrual health. Budgets don't include sanitation facilities. Legislators, often overwhelmingly male, don't talk about periods because it's seen as uncomfortable, private, or irrelevant. But let's be clear, there is nothing irrelevant about a public health issue that impacts over half the global population. When taboos keep menstrual health out of national conversations, the result is a total lack of funding, infrastructure, legislation, innovation, And without those things, there's no access to safe products, no public toilets equipped with bins or water, no local manufacturing of affordable pads, no support networks for girls in crisis, just silence, just shame, just struggle. You might think, well, that's terrible, but it only affects girls, right? Wrong. When half of a country's population is held back by a natural biological function, everyone loses. Families lose income because girls drop out of school and marry young. Communities lose talent because women can't work when they're forced into monthly isolation. Economies lose productivity because potential is wasted. Nations lose progress because gender equality stalls. This isn't a niche problem, this is foundational. The silence around female sanitation doesn't just oppress girls, it weakens societies. Alexandra's reflection. So here's my ask. Start talking. Start breaking the silence in your home, in your workplace, in your schools, in your communities. We cannot fix what we cannot name. We cannot solve what we refuse to even acknowledge. If we want a world that treats women and girls with dignity, it starts with conversation, with honesty, with rejecting shame and choosing empathy instead. Because menstruation is not a crisis. The silence around it is. Coming up next, the practical reality of what these girls and women actually face. What happens when there's no toilet, no soap, no pad, and no privacy? We'll dive into the infrastructure problem and why something as simple as a clean, private toilet can change a life. Stay with me. You're listening to Cluster Fudge. I'm Alexandra, and we're just getting started. Let's talk about what happens when a girl or woman in a poor country wakes up one morning on her period and there's nowhere to go, nowhere to clean herself, nowhere to change her pad if she even has one. Nowhere safe, nowhere private, nowhere dignified. This is the sanitation crisis. And it's not just about comfort, it's about health, safety, freedom, and basic human rights. 1. The toilet that doesn't exist. Across the developing world, billions of people lack access to safe sanitation. According to the World Health Organization and UNICEF, 3.6 billion people, nearly half the global population, do not have access to safely managed sanitation services. That means no proper toilets, no running water, and no safe disposal systems. For menstruating girls and women, the absence of these basic necessities is devastating. In many rural areas, the bathroom is a field. In urban slums, it may be a shared public toilet, dirty, overcrowded, and far from home. In schools, there may be a latrine with no door. And in some places, nothing at all. Now imagine trying to manage your period in those conditions. No clean toilet, no soap, no water, no pad, no bin, and nowhere to go without being seen, or worse, harassed or attacked. Menstrual hygiene doesn't begin and end with pads. It's also about access to clean water and the ability to wash yourself. But in many poor regions, water sources are far from home, sometimes a 2-hour walk each way. Water may be contaminated with disease-causing pathogens. There may be no water at all in schools, clinics, or public toilets. And let's not forget, even if water exists, cultural norms may prevent girls from using it during their period. In some communities, girls are not allowed to bathe or touch water while menstruating due to outdated superstitions. In others, girls must wash their reusable cloth pads in secrecy and dry them indoors where they stay damp and become breeding grounds for infection. This isn't just undignified, it's dangerous. The health hazards are real. Let's make this plain. Poor menstrual hygiene isn't just uncomfortable or embarrassing. It's a public health crisis. When women and girls are forced to use rags, newspapers, leaves, ash, or even mud to manage their periods, when they cannot bathe properly, change in privacy, or dispose of waste safely, they face very real risks. Urinary tract infections, UTIs, reproductive tract infections, RTIs, bacterial vaginosis. Cervical cancer risks increase from prolonged exposure to poor hygiene. Toxic shock syndrome, though rare, can be fatal if caused by prolonged tampon use without clean water. According to studies from India and sub-Saharan Africa, adolescent girls with no access to sanitary products or clean toilets are more likely to experience infections and less likely to seek medical help due to shame. And the cost of treatment? Often unaffordable or simply unavailable. Now, let's go back to school, or rather, let's talk about why so many girls can't stay in school. Because when schools don't have gender-sensitive sanitation facilities, meaning toilets that are clean, private, safe, and equipped for menstruation, girls stay home, period. UNICEF estimates that 1 in 3 schools globally lack adequate toilets for girls. Some schools have no toilets at all. Others have latrines that boys and girls must share, with no locks, no bins and no running water. Some schools forbid girls from disposing of sanitary products in toilets, shaming them if they do. And when girls stain their clothes and are laughed at, they never forget it. So they stay home. And if that happens once a month over a few years, the education gap becomes irreversible. Girls fall behind, they drop out, they marry early. They get pregnant young. And the cycle of poverty continues, all because of a toilet that wasn't there. Let's talk about safety. In many poor communities, women don't have toilets in or near their homes, so when they need to relieve themselves or clean up during their period, they have to go outside, often in the dark. And that's when the danger comes. Women and girls risk sexual harassment, rape, and physical violence, just for trying to manage a bodily function. In countries like Kenya, Bangladesh and India, there are documented cases of girls being assaulted or killed while attempting to use outdoor latrines at night. The absence of basic sanitation doesn't just strip girls of privacy, it strips them of safety. Let's zoom out for a second. Climate change is making all of this worse. Floods, droughts, natural disasters, they all impact already fragile sanitation infrastructure. When a flood destroys a pit latrine in Bangladesh, it takes months, sometimes years, to rebuild. When drought hits Ethiopia, girls walk further for water, often sacrificing school time. When conflict displaces families, as we've seen in Sudan, Syria, and the Rohingya refugee camps, sanitation is the first thing to collapse. In refugee camps, only 17% of women and girls say they have access to safe menstrual hygiene management, according to UNHCR. That's not just a sanitation issue, that's a gender-based emergency. So the sanitation crisis isn't just about toilets. It's about dignity. It's about equity. It's about whether a girl has the tools to become a student, a leader, a professional, or whether she will be held hostage by biology and infrastructure. Because when sanitation fails, girls disappear from schools, from the workforce, from the future. Clean, private, safe toilets shouldn't be a luxury. They should be a universal right. Coming up next, we dig into the issue of sanitary products, the cost, the shame, the taxes, and the environmental impact. We'll talk about why millions of girls can't afford a single pad and what's being done to change that. Let's cut to the core of something painfully simple, something that, for many of us, is bought without a second thought at the nearest pharmacy or grocery store, something that costs a few dollars and yet costs millions of girls their health, dignity and futures when they can't access it. I'm talking about sanitary pads and other menstrual products. This segment is about the pad problem, the intersection of access, affordability and stigma. Because when you live in a place where menstruation is taboo, sanitary products are expensive and education is lacking, managing your period becomes a crisis every single month. When a pad is a luxury item, let's talk about price. You and I might think of sanitary pads or tampons as basic items like toilet paper or soap. But in many developing countries, pads are seen as luxury goods, if they're available at all. In rural Uganda, a pack of disposable pads might cost $1 to $2, a price that sounds modest, until you realise that many families live on less than $1.90 a day. So imagine this trade-off. Buy sanitary pads for your daughter, or buy food for the family, or pay for her school books. That's not a decision a parent should ever have to make, and too often the pad comes last. Let's look at the data. Over 500 million women and girls worldwide lack access to menstrual hygiene product facilities. In India, it's estimated that only 36% of menstruating women use sanitary pads. In sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in 10 girls misses school during menstruation. Some reports say up to 20% miss school every month. Why? Because they don't have access to a clean, reliable or affordable way to manage their periods. Instead, they're forced to use old rags, newspaper, corn husks, leaves, mattress stuffing, mud, even ashes. These alternatives are often unsanitary, uncomfortable, and dangerous, leading to infections, irritation, and trauma. 3. The pink tax and period poverty. In many countries, menstrual products are taxed as luxury items, not necessities. This is called the pink tax, and it's as absurd as it sounds. To this day, in parts of Africa, Latin America, and Asia, pads are taxed at higher rates than razors, cigarettes, or even chocolate. In countries like Kenya, activists successfully fought to remove the tax, but the import costs still make pads unaffordable for the poorest families. In 2018, the Kenyan government supplied free pads in public schools, but by 2021, funding was slashed, leaving many girls back where they started, bleeding in shame and silence. Period poverty, the inability to afford menstrual products, isn't just an economic issue, it's a gendered injustice, a reflection of how low women's health ranks on the list of global priorities. Now let's talk product types. In wealthier nations, people can choose between pads, tampons, menstrual cups, reusable pads, and period underwear. But in poor countries, choice is a privilege. Reusable products are often recommended, they're cheaper in the long run and more sustainable for the environment. But let's be honest, as they require water, privacy, and soap. If a girl doesn't have a clean bathroom, a place to dry her cloth pad, soap to wash it, or the safety to do this without being judged, reusable options become unusable. Even menstrual cups, which are cost-effective and eco-friendly, often require boiling water for sterilisation, which isn't available in many homes. So while solutions exist, infrastructure has to come first. In many societies, menstruation is surrounded by harmful myths and taboos. Menstruating girls are dirty, you can't enter a temple or touch food. If your blood is seen, you're cursed. Don't let boys see your pad wrapper. Don't talk about periods in public. The silence around menstruation is deafening and dangerous. In India, for example, a 2014 study showed that nearly 70% of girls had no idea what menstruation was when they first got their period. Can you imagine the trauma of bleeding, thinking you're dying because no one prepared you? That trauma is compounded when you're laughed at in class, your clothes are stained, you're forbidden from touching water or sleeping in the house, or worse, you're isolated in a hut or banished from community life. This shame makes girls afraid to ask for help, afraid to even say the word period. And without open conversation, education dies. Without education, stigma grows, and with stigma, women suffer in silence. Some of the barriers aren't financial, they're cultural or religious. In parts of Nepal, the practice of chaupadi, banishing menstruating women to huts, still happens despite being banned. Girls have died from snake bites, exposure, and suffocation in these makeshift shelters. In conservative communities, even buying pads is taboo. Stores may hide them behind the counter or wrap them in newspaper like contraband. And boys? Often taught nothing, which means male teachers, fathers and brothers don't understand, or worse, perpetuate the shame. This is why menstrual education for all genders is critical. Here's what I want you to take away from this segment. Sanitary pads are not a luxury. They're not a fashion accessory. They're not optional. They're a lifeline. They are the difference between confidence and humiliation, between health and infection, between staying in school and dropping out. The pad problem is not just a problem of product. It's a problem of justice, education, equality, and human dignity. We can't expect women to rise if we won't give them the basics to stand. Coming up in segment 4, we'll talk about education and why menstruation should be a subject taught in every classroom, not just whispered about in bathrooms, because the first step to dignity is knowledge. You've probably heard the phrase, knowledge is power, but in the world of female sanitation, it's more than a slogan, it's a lifeline, a shield, a path to freedom. Because when girls aren't taught about their own bodies, when schools ignore menstruation, when silence replaces science, we don't just have an education gap, we have a dignity gap, a health gap, and a human rights gap. This is segment 4, the education gap, why menstrual knowledge is power. Let's dive in. 1. the absence of basic education. Let's start with the basics. Millions of girls around the world begin menstruating without knowing what's happening to them. They bleed, they panic, they feel shame, and they go searching for answers in silence. A 2014 report by UNICEF and WaterAid found in India, 1 in 3 girls didn't know what menstruation was when they got their first period. In parts of rural Ethiopia, some girls believed they were dying. In Uganda, many girls drop out of school permanently after menarche, simply because they're too embarrassed, or this ignorance is not their fault. It is the fault of systems that refuse to talk about periods, classrooms that avoid the topic, parents who are too ashamed to discuss it, curriculums that treat menstruation as taboo. We teach algebra, we teach history, but in many places we fail to teach the one biological process half the population experiences for decades of their lives. 2. Cultural silence begins at home. In many homes, talking about periods is still considered inappropriate, even dirty. Mothers often whisper advice, if any. Fathers are left completely out of the conversation. And girls grow up with a deep belief that their bodies are embarrassing, impure, or even sinful during menstruation. In Nepal, some girls are taught not to touch men, not to cook, not to pray, and not to enter temples while on their periods. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, the word period is almost never spoken aloud. It is referred to in euphemisms, the sickness, the red days, or simply that thing. The result? Confusion about what's happening, stigma that becomes internalized, lack of preparedness for menstrual hygiene, and a life shaped by shame and misinformation. This cultural silence is handed down generation after generation unless education intervenes. In an ideal world, schools would be safe havens of knowledge, places where children learn the truth about their bodies without shame. But in reality, many schools in low-income countries don't include menstrual education in the curriculum at all. Teachers, especially male teachers, often skip those chapters or gloss over them out of embarrassment. Students may never hear the word period in a classroom setting. Even when menstruation is mentioned, it's often taught as a biological inconvenience, not connected to hygiene, rights, or dignity, delivered only to girls as if it's irrelevant to boys. And here's the problem with that. When boys are kept ignorant, they become mockers instead of allies. When teachers are embarrassed, they teach silence, not confidence. When schools fail to provide answers, kids turn to myths, peers, or the internet for guidance, and often they're misled. Let's be crystal clear. Menstrual education is about more than hygiene. It's about body literacy, understanding how your body works, health awareness, spotting infections or abnormalities, agency, making informed choices about your reproductive health, equality, rejecting stigma and demanding respect, empowerment, realizing that menstruation is a sign of life, not shame. When girls are taught that periods are natural, when they know how to manage them safely, when they learn how to track their cycles and understand their bodies, they stand taller. They are more likely to stay in school, talk openly about their health, stand up to discrimination, and break cycles of shame in their families and communities. Let's not leave the other half of the population out. Boys need menstrual education too. Why? Because they are classmates who can offer empathy instead of ridicule, sons who can support their mothers and sisters, future husbands and fathers who can break taboos in their homes, and leaders who can make informed policy decisions one day. When boys are educated about menstruation, we reduce teasing and bullying in schools, normalise menstruation across genders, shift societal attitudes toward equality. Imagine a world where no girl is afraid of a bloodstain on her uniform because every boy around her understands what it is and doesn't care. That's the world menstrual education can help create. 6. What effective education looks like. So, what does good menstrual education include? Scientific accuracy. Real facts about periods, ovulation and hygiene. Practical advice, how to use, dispose of or clean products. Emotional support, affirming that menstruation is healthy and natural. Inclusivity, addressing the needs of transgender men and non-binary individuals who menstruate. Policy advocacy, teaching girls their right to sanitation and dignity. And it must be age-appropriate, taught in schools, homes, and communities, delivered by both men and women, repeated and reinforced, not a one-time talk. If knowledge is power, then menstrual education is a revolution waiting to happen. We can't end period poverty without it. We can't fight stigma without it. We can't build gender equality without it. When a girl learns about her body, she learns more than biology. She learns self-worth. She learns that her body is not dirty, that her health is not shameful, that her silence is not required. And when the world learns alongside her, we all grow stronger. Coming up next in segment 5, the infrastructure void, toilets, water, and the fight for dignity, we'll look at the physical realities that make menstruation a crisis in many schools and communities, the lack of safe, private bathrooms, clean water, and proper disposal systems. Imagine this. You're a 13-year-old girl. You're in school. Suddenly you feel it, the beginning of your period. But there's no toilet, no water, no bin, no privacy, no spare pad, and no way out except to go home, or worse, never come back. For millions of girls around the world, this isn't just imagination, it's daily life. Welcome to segment 5, the infrastructure void, toilets, water, and the fight for dignity. Because talking about menstruation means talking about the physical spaces where menstruation happens or is forced into hiding. Let's dive in. Let's start with the most basic of needs, a toilet. According to UNICEF and WHO, over 2 billion people worldwide lack access to safely managed sanitation. In sub-Saharan Africa, only 1 in 4 schools has a functional gender-separated toilet. In some countries, girls must wait until nightfall to relieve themselves in open fields, exposing themselves to harassment or assault. A toilet is more than a toilet. For menstruating girls, it's a private refuge to change a pad, a safe space to manage blood flow or pain, a barrier between dignity and humiliation. Without a toilet, a girl isn't just uncomfortable. She's stripped of autonomy over her body. Menstrual hygiene isn't just about pads or tampons, it's also about water. Clean water too. Wash hands, clean reusable cloths or cups, rinse underwear, bathe and feel refreshed. But in many rural areas across South Asia, sub-Saharan Africa and parts of Latin America, girls walk miles for water, and when they get it, it's prioritized for cooking or drinking. Schools often don't have running water at all. Shared taps in public areas offer no privacy, making washing menstruation-related materials nearly impossible. A 2021 study by WaterAid found that in 1/3 of schools in Bangladesh, girls missed 3 to 5 days a month, simply because there was no water available to manage their periods. No water means no cleanliness, no comfort, no confidence. When there's nowhere to throw it away. Now let's talk about what happens after a pad or cloth is used. In high-income countries, you wrap it, toss it, flush it, or bin it. But in many low-resource settings, there are no waste bins in school bathrooms. There is no incineration system for sanitary waste. Girls resort to burying, burning, hiding, or even flushing pads, which clogs pipes and causes environmental damage. In Kenya, studies showed that girls often carry used pads home in plastic bags because they're too ashamed to leave them in open bins. In India, in many rural schools, used menstrual cloths are hidden behind toilets or in bushes. Embarrassment, poor sanitation, health risks, and the deep-seated feeling that menstruation must be hidden at all costs. Infrastructure isn't just a physical issue, it shapes our cultural norms. When there's nowhere to dispose of a pad, the message is clear. This is something shameful, something dirty, something not meant to be seen. What happens when a school lacks toilets, water, and disposal systems? Girls start skipping school, 1 day a month, then several days, eventually permanently. According to UNESCO, 1 in 10 girls in sub-Saharan Africa misses school during their period. In some regions, dropout rates spike after girls reach puberty. Sanitation, or the lack of it, becomes a reason girls don't complete their education. Education is already a challenge for many. Add period stigma and poor infrastructure, and it becomes nearly impossible. Some girls fail exams because their periods coincide with test days. Others fall behind and can't catch up. Many simply choose to stay home. That choice isn't about laziness or lack of ambition. It's about not bleeding in public, being mocked, or sitting for hours in wet, soiled clothes with no way to change. This is the silent price of poor infrastructure. It's important to acknowledge that the crisis isn't uniform. In urban slums, there may be toilets, but they are communal, unsanitary, or unsafe for girls at night. In rural areas, there may be no toilets at all, with open defecation still widely practiced. Even in middle-income countries, menstrual facilities are often lacking in refugee camps, informal settlements, or underfunded schools. And for girls with disabilities, the challenges are even steeper. No ramps, no accessible bathrooms, no adaptive sanitation products. In short, if your body bleeds, you are disproportionately punished by infrastructure gaps. So what would it take to change this? It's not rocket science. It's basic human dignity. Here's what we need. 1. Gender-specific toilets in every school, with doors that lock, with clean running water, with menstrual bins inside. Free or subsidised sanitary products, available in bathrooms or from a school nurse, not hidden in shame but normalised. 3. Disposal systems, incinerators for safe and hygienic waste removal, eco-friendly pads that biodegrade if possible. 4. Menstrual hygiene education as policy, tied to infrastructure funding, made part of national school standards. 5. Designing with girls in mind. Let girls be part of the solution. Ask them what they need. Let their voices shape the bathrooms, schools, and water systems being built. There's a quote that says, "You can measure a society by how it treats its most vulnerable." Well, let's measure. Let's look at the girls who are 11 or 12 or 13, just trying to get through math class while quietly bleeding through their uniforms. Let's look at the refugee camps, the slums, the rural schools with no toilets and no dignity. Let's look at them and then ask ourselves, can we really say we care about women's rights if we don't even give them a clean toilet? Because this isn't about infrastructure, it's about inclusion, it's about justice, it's about being seen. Menstruation is not a crisis, but the way the world handles it is. Coming up next in segment 6, the economic cost, how period poverty hurts everyone, we'll explore how poor menstrual infrastructure and product scarcity don't just affect girls, they affect entire communities, economies and futures. So far, we've peeled back the layers of a global crisis, the silence, the lack of access, the infrastructure failures, and the education gap around menstrual health in poor countries. But let's not stop at what's broken. Let's now ask the vital question. What's being done? Who's showing up for girls and women? What solutions are on the table? And are they enough? Let's turn our lens toward hope, toward action, toward innovation. 1. Global initiatives where governments and NGOs step in. Across the world, international bodies, non-profits, and a few forward-thinking governments are beginning to take menstrual health seriously. Here are some examples. UNICEF and UNESCO. Both organisations have launched Wash in Schools programmes focusing on water, sanitation and hygiene. These programmes support gender-segregated toilets, menstrual hygiene education, and training for teachers on how to talk about periods without stigma. WaterAid, a major player in menstrual hygiene advocacy, has created Periods in Emergencies toolkits for refugee camps and disaster zones, works to integrate period-friendly sanitation infrastructure in schools across parts of Africa and South Asia. Developed menstrual health programs in over 50 countries, trains girls, families and boys to change perceptions around menstruation, has helped distribute millions of pads, build toilet facilities, and develop reusable pad-making workshops. Government programs. India's menstrual hygiene scheme under the Ministry of Health provides subsidised sanitary pads to adolescent girls in rural areas. Uganda and Kenya have committed to removing taxes on menstrual products, a huge step in making them more affordable. Nepal, after global outcry, banned the chopadi practice, isolating menstruating women. Though enforcement remains a challenge, the movement is growing. But here's the problem. Scale, funding and sustainability remain limited. These are bold steps, but they often operate as isolated patches, not systemic fixes. Sometimes the most impactful work isn't done in Geneva or Washington, D.C., but in tiny villages and urban slums, by local heroes who know the problem because they live it. Here are a few inspiring stories. Arunachalam Muruganantham, India's pad man, created a low-cost sanitary pad machine for rural women. His invention allows communities to manufacture and sell pads affordably, sustainably, and locally. His work has spread to over 20 countries and inspired the Bollywood movie Padman. Girls' clubs in Malawi. In many schools, older girls are trained to teach younger girls about menstruation and make reusable cloth pads. These peer education programs create safe spaces for learning and solidarity. Combines pad distribution with comprehensive reproductive health education. Produces content-rich booklets for girls that teach body literacy, self-esteem, and menstrual care. Focuses on long-term empowerment, not just product giveaways. Reusable and biodegradable products. From banana fiber pads in India to washable underwear in Uganda, innovators are challenging product norms with sustainable alternatives. These solutions help reduce cost, waste, and dependency on foreign aid. These grassroots leaders understand something critical. Periods are not just a women's issue. They are a societal issue, an economic issue, and an infrastructure issue. And change must be locally led and culturally grounded. What's also encouraging is the growing visibility of menstrual education, not just for girls, but for everyone. From school-based programs to viral digital campaigns, the goal is to change hearts, minds, and policies. Campaign examples: Period Positive, a UK-based initiative spreading worldwide, aiming to normalise conversations around menstruation in classrooms and homes. End Period Poverty, run by organisations like Freedom for Girls and the PAD Project. This campaign tackles stigma, affordability, and access through a multi-pronged global approach. These movements aren't just symbolic, they're sparking policy change, empowering girls, and shifting social norms. But again, momentum must meet infrastructure and money to truly move the needle. What's still missing? The gaps in the movement. For all the progress, there are massive blind spots. One, funding fatigue. Menstrual health often falls under the radar when big donors look at global health. It's lumped in with general water and sanitation budgets, rarely treated as a standalone priority. Refugee camps and conflict zones often overlook menstrual needs in emergency aid kits. Many girls in crisis zones have nothing but rags or leaves during their periods, which increases infection risk and trauma. Most programs still only target girls, ignoring the fact that boys, fathers, teachers, and politicians also shape the stigma. Breaking the silence requires all genders to understand and support menstrual health. 4, poor monitoring and evaluation. Many governments and NGOs fail to track impact, meaning they can't prove if pad distributions or toilets are truly improving girls' lives. We need data, accountability, and feedback loops. From charity to rights-based approach. Here's the truth. Access to menstrual products, clean toilets, and health education should not be viewed as charity. They are human rights. Let me say that again. Menstrual dignity is not a privilege. It is not a luxury. It is not extra. It is essential. When we treat menstruation like a dirty secret or like an afterthought in global health planning, we're reinforcing a hierarchy that says some people deserve dignity. Others don't. It's time to shift the narrative from pity to power, from pads to policy, from band-aid aid to systemic change. And the only way we do that is through pressure, from the ground up and the top down. We need more money, more leadership, and more visibility. We need to say clearly and unapologetically, menstrual justice is gender justice. Menstrual justice is economic justice. Menstrual justice is environmental justice. In the final segment, we'll explore what you, yes, you listening right now, can actually do about all this. Because even if you live halfway across the world from a village without toilets, you are not powerless. Welcome back to Cluster Fudge. I'm Alexandra, and we've travelled far together today into the shadows where dignity has been denied and into the spaces where hope is beginning to take root. We've spoken about silence, infrastructure, education, stigma, and innovation. Now we ask the most important question. What can you do? What power do we as individuals have, especially if we're oceans away from the nearest village facing this crisis? The answer is a lot more than you think. Let's unpack that, because local action, when multiplied, becomes global impact. 1. Start with awareness. Talk about periods publicly. Let's begin with the simplest, yet most radical act. Break the silence. Speak openly about periods with friends, family, sons, daughters. Normalise period talk in schools, workplaces, and social media. If you're a parent, raise period-positive kids. If you're a teacher, incorporate menstrual education into health lessons. If you're an influencer, big or small, use your platform. Every time we treat menstruation as normal, natural, and non-shameful, we help dismantle a culture of stigma that has hurt women globally for generations. Because let's be honest, silence here is connected to silence there. When it's taboo in the West, it's considered shameful elsewhere. 2. Support organisations doing the groundwork. Let your money speak when your hands can't reach. There are incredible organisations doing boots on the ground work, building toilets, distributing pads, training health workers, lobbying governments, and empowering girls. Here are a few worth checking out. The Pad Project. thepadproject.org/ originated from the Oscar-winning short film Period, End of Sentence, installs pad-making machines and educates communities. Days for Girls. daysforgirls.org distributes washable menstrual kits globally, offers health education programs to girls and boys. www.wateraid.org/ improves sanitation and hygiene in schools and communities, helps governments integrate menstrual hygiene into national policies. zanafrica.org combines product access with rights-based sexual education in Kenya. Even small donations go far in rural economies. $10 can buy months of dignity for a girl in need. You can also host a fundraiser, sponsor a school kit, or join a recurring donor program. Push for policy at home and abroad. Menstrual health is a political issue, and politicians don't act until people make noise. Here's what advocacy can look like. Contact your local representatives to support legislation for tax-free menstrual products. Many US states still charge sales tax on them, known as the tampon tax. Encourage schools and public buildings to provide free menstrual products just like they provide toilet paper. Support campaigns that push UN agencies and large donors to treat menstrual hygiene as a core issue, not a footnote. And remember, you don't need to be an activist with a megaphone. A single letter, a signed petition, a well-shared tweet, a city council meeting comment. These add up. 4. Support sustainable menstrual products and businesses. Another underrated path to impact. What you buy. Your purchases send a message to the market. Try supporting companies that create biodegradable or reusable menstrual products like menstrual cups, period underwear, cloth pads. Use profits to fund menstrual health projects abroad. Prioritize ethical labor and community involvement. Brands like Aunt Flo USA provides free products to schools and offices. Salt menstrual cups that fund international education. Ruby Cup, buy one, give one to girls in need. Thinks donates to organizations working on period equity. Consumer pressure also forces big manufacturers to reduce waste, lower prices, and innovate for inclusion. Menstruation isn't just a women's issue, it's a human issue, a family issue, a workforce issue, a societal issue. Men, if you're listening, you can help break taboos. You can be part of the solution. Learn about menstrual health, speak respectfully and openly with daughters, wives, colleagues and students. Vote for leaders and support policies that value reproductive rights and health equity. Challenge period jokes or stigma when you hear them. If you're in a leadership position, school principal, employer, policymaker, make spaces period inclusive. Male silence has long been part of the problem, but male inclusion can be part of the solution. Create art, podcasts, campaigns, and conversations. Lastly, use your creative voice to amplify the message. Start a podcast episode like this one. Write a blog post about the global sanitation crisis. Share menstrual myths from different cultures on Instagram or TikTok. Interview a local organizer for your YouTube channel. Organize a period packing party for shelters or overseas donations. Don't underestimate the ripple effect of your creativity. When we talk about periods out loud, we help rewrite the story for the next generation. I know that talking about periods makes many people uncomfortable, but comfort isn't the point. Justice is. This issue, female sanitation in poor countries, is about whether we believe every human being deserves to be clean, safe, confident, and seen. You may not fix everything. You may not even change a whole village, but you can be part of a movement that is louder, braver, and more compassionate than the silence that came before it. Because in the end, menstrual dignity is not about blood, it's about humanity. Coming up in the next Cluster Fudge episode, we take a hard look at another global injustice that's hiding in plain sight. But for now, I'm Alexandra. Thank you for listening, thank you for caring, and thank you for helping us unravel the mess, one thread at a time.